Can DORA metrics transform your team? That's the question we're going to answer today on Operationally Intelligent. I'm joined by Nathen Harvey of Google. Nathen leads the DORA team, and Nathen's going to share how DORA's research is not just about metrics, but a philosophy that enhances team culture and performance. We dig into how smaller, iterative changes can lead to big improvements in both software delivery and team well-being. So stay tuned as we unpack real-world examples and actionable advice to help your organization harness the power of DORA to drive operational intelligence. Nathen, thanks for joining me today. It's really great to have you on the podcast. I was wondering if we could start, for those who maybe don't know you, could you share a little bit about your journey and certainly how you sort of came to lead the DORA team at Google Cloud?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for asking. And thanks for having me on today, Adam. I really appreciate it. So I've been with Google Cloud for about 7 years now. And shortly after I joined Google Cloud acquired a company named DORA. So that, in some respects, is sort of how I came to lead up DORA. But there is, of course, a little bit of history that goes back before that. Prior to joining Google, I was at Chef Software for, again, about 6 or 7 years. And I was really leading sort of our community there, the open source work that we were doing and so forth. But while I was working there, I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Nicole Forsgren and Jez Humble, who later went on to found this company called DORA. So when I joined Google, I got once again to work with Jez and Nicole, which was super awesome. Nicole has since moved on she went to GitHub first, and now she's at Microsoft Research. Jez is currently still at Google, but although he's working full-time as an SRE, which is pretty exciting. And so just given my history with DORA and my deep interest in this space, it made sense for me to step up and take over leading DORA.
Nice, yeah, that's a really cool journey. Yeah, well, hopefully you're the right person to answer a few more questions for me on that
Oh,
hot
I hope
topic.
so. Yeah.
For anyone new to DORA, let's just go straight in, bottom floor. What is it? Why has it become such a sort of touchstone in conversation about software delivery performance?
Yeah, for sure. So first, of course, there are many Doras out there. You might know the small cartoon girl. That's not the Dora that
Sure.
we're talking about. There's also the Digital Operational Resilience Act over in the European Union. That's not the Dora that I represent. The Dora that I represent, though, is a research program that's been running for over a decade now. And this research is really all about how do technology-driven teams and organizations improve. And specifically, DORA has sort of a center of gravity, if you will, around software delivery performance. This is one of those things that we've been measuring for many, many years, trying to understand, one, how do you measure software delivery performance? Two, what are the impacts that improving your software delivery performance has? And three, what are the capabilities and conditions that you need in order to improve software delivery performance? And so that's really kind of how DORA has researched the world. And we do research the world. So the large majority of our data in our research program comes from an annual survey that we run. We go out and we survey organizations of every shape and size from around the world in every industry, really trying to understand how people are doing today. And then we can use those insights to provide guidance and to point to areas where some teams might be struggling while others are succeeding. And that can help illuminate a path for what are the next steps you might take on your journey of continuous improvement?
Yeah, nice. Well, yeah. You mentioned insight there, sort of coming out of the research. I was just wondering, is there anything that sort of still surprises people when they hear it, like today, out of all those years of research?
Yeah, it is interesting. I think that, if we go right back to that center of gravity that I talked about, software delivery performance, when we measure that within DORA, we kind of think of two different factors, if you will, of software delivery performance. The throughput, so how much change can you move through the system, but also then the stability of those changes. So we have metrics like what we call the change failure rate, or what I call the expletive rate, because it's the rate at which when you push to production, you or someone around you shouts out an expletive. That usually means we got to roll that change back or push forward a hot fix. That kind of is one of those stability measures that we have in that factor. One of the things that we've seen year in and year out throughout our research is that throughput and stability are not trade-offs of one another. They tend to move together. Either your software delivery is fast and stable, or it's slow and unstable. And that is a pattern that we continually see. And even today, more than a decade on, there are certainly still teams that think the best way to improve our stability is to move slower. And our data just shows that that's not actually the case.
Wow, that is interesting. I mean, yeah, naturally, I think my brain would have gone to that. You're going too fast. You need to slow down a little bit. Is there any sort of personal opinion there on sort of why that tends to be?
Yeah, I think that part of it actually is in how we measure things and some of the insights that we've had over the years. I think one of the best ways to improve software delivery performance is to work in smaller batches so that we're always shipping smaller changes. There's a tendency as we're building things to want to release an entire service at a time or an entire feature at a time. But if we can get into a place where we can incrementally and iteratively deliver a feature, sometimes that involves things like splitting out deployments or separating deployments from releases, which, one way that you can do that is through feature flagging. So I could release a partial feature behind a feature flag. Maybe no one gets it, but it's in production. And then I can build that feature out further, maybe even do some initial testing before I have that feature complete. But that feature complete may involve multiple deployments over time. And one of the things that's really interesting about this is that we find that the teams that are doing this, yes, their software delivery performance improves, but so does the well-being for the people on the team. In other words, they have
Yeah.
less burnout, they have higher job satisfaction. Like all of these are really critical components that we really love to dig into. It's much more than just the technology.
Yeah, I guess yeah. I mean that does actually make a lot of sense. I was just thinking sort of slow and fast don't necessarily mean more or less work in the context. It's more the size of the package going through, right? It's how much is being bundled up together when you're measuring deployment frequency. So
Yes,
yes,
yes. It's
smaller
also a great,
change. Yeah.
yeah, smaller changes, and it's a great way to sort of improve that feedback cycle, right? As we're writing code, we're guessing. I mean, they're educated guesses as to what code we should be writing and what features our users might like, but we don't know that for sure until we can get those changes in front of users and get actual live feedback from them. Now, we want to get feedback throughout that entire delivery process, and that certainly helps us prevent bad changes from going out. But this is all about a sort of a journey of continuous learning, and if we can ship more experiments, we can learn more.
Nice. Well, I'm hooked. Good.
All
Okay,
right.
you've got me. You've got me already. Now, I think I'm probably guilty of just thinking sort of DORA equals those like four key metrics. What is actually beyond that? What is the rest of it?
Yeah, so the rest of it is really kind of, like I said, center of gravity is sort of around those metrics. And you mentioned the four metrics. So just really quickly for anyone who hasn't heard of them, I'll iterate those each. So like I said, we have two factors, throughput and stability. On the throughput side, we typically measure your change lead time. In other words, how long does it take for a change to go from committed to version control all the way through to production? And we measure your deployment frequency. So how frequently are you updating production? And on the stability side, we have that change failure rate or the expletive rate that I talked about. When you ship something, how often do you have to roll it back or immediately push forward a hot fix? And then our final metric is the failed deployment recovery time. So when you do have one of those expletive moments, how long before you're wiping your brow saying, all right, we're back to normal, users are happy again? So those are the four software delivery performance metrics. Now, when we think about these metrics, we kind of think about them in two different ways. One, they're leading indicators for things that we really care about, things like organizational performance, well-being for the people on your team, product performance as examples. But they're trailing indicators for sort of how does your engineering capacity or your engineering team work? And those we call capabilities and conditions that you need to have in place. And so each year we're researching new and varied set of capabilities and conditions. Those might include technical things like, are you using version control or how are you using version control? Are you practicing continuous integration? But they go beyond just these technical capabilities and conditions and look at things like, well, no, your change approval process. What does that look like? What does that process look like? Is it a heavyweight process? Is it a lightweight process? And all the way through to culture of your teams. Like when something goes wrong, how does your organization respond? Something went wrong. Do we look for someone to fire because something went wrong? Or do we treat that as an opportunity to learn more about how this overall system, this socio-technical system works? And so it is really those capabilities and conditions that we investigate that I think really provides us the best guidance that you can get out of DORA's research.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah, it's funny that this podcast series is. I've probably heard the term socio-technical more in my life in recording these episodes than I have all of the rest of my life. Yeah, it's interesting how that sort of keeps coming up. It really is sort of a big part of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. For better or worse, you can't just buy a new tool and deploy it and have it fix all of your problems.
Yeah.
There's still people involved.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly true. Are there any sort of hidden or maybe say like less discussed parts of DORA research that you wish more teams paid attention to, more people understood?
Yeah, I think it is really in thinking about those capabilities and conditions. What we often recommend folks do is, we have this on Dora.dev, which is the primary website that you can go to. There's a research page, and on that research page, we have what we call the Dora core model. That DORA core model kind of shows you which capabilities and conditions are predictive of better software delivery performance. And the thing that I always encourage teams to do is take into consideration those capabilities and conditions and think about how things are working on your team. As much as possible, kind of have a dispassionate review of those capabilities and conditions and find the ones where you're weakest, because it's those that you really want to improve the overall throughput and stability of the system. And that really gives you pointers to where should I invest time and energy. Another sort of underappreciated, underused technique is value stream mapping. When we think about any application or service, one of the things that I find is most valuable is to bring together the cross-functional team that's responsible for that application, all the way from like idea generation through to answering customer support calls. Have representation from every team involved with that application and just map out the process. What does it take to go from an idea to a customer saying thank you? What are all of the steps and handoffs? Just by visualizing that, teams tend to find a lot of areas for improvement where there's a lot of waste or duplication in the system that they can eliminate or improve, automate away, etc.
That's great. I mean, that makes my segue into sort of operational intelligence nice and easy. It often becomes, I don't know, I don't think a lot of people often consider that it is more than just your telemetry, your, how long it's taking for things to, your API latency, that kind of stuff. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, it seems like it is very much like a bigger picture kind of philosophy almost. Is there how do those findings sort of tend to connect with those sort of like bigger questions of culture, leadership, organizational performance? Does it slot into the rest of the business world really easily?
Yeah, I would say that it can slot into the rest of the business world really easily. One of the challenges, I think, because of that center of gravity around software delivery performance metrics, all too often I find technical leaders going to their business counterparts and saying, "Hey, we've improved our deployment frequency." Your CEO doesn't care about your deployment frequency, quite frankly. They care about the other matters of the business that actually matter. And so I think as technologists, it's important for us to recognize that we're working in this larger system, driving towards some operational goals, some business goals that we have, which is maybe, more revenue, maybe faster signups, more customers signing up for our whatever service it is that we're offering, more of them coming back to make additional purchases. We have to start thinking in these terms and then understanding that as engineers, we can't necessarily go make customer support better, but we can, that sort of knobs and dials that we have access to are our ability to ship software, our ability to improve the user experience in the software that they're actually working with. And so in that respect, we care about those software delivery performance metrics, and they're sort of our pathway to those
Mm.
business metrics that really matter. And I think this is also why it's so important. DORA's research has shown that better software delivery performance drives those organizational performance metrics. But I always remind teams, like, you shouldn't trust DORA. You should prove it. Like, prove it out in your context, I think is really important. And this is why another big piece of advice I always give people is you've got to sort of watch those software delivery performance metrics together with your business metrics that matter and see that they move together, right? As software delivery performance improves, so too do those business outcomes.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Actually, the question I always sort of have in my head about when people are trying to make the step from so like monitoring to observability to operational intelligence is the like the so what question. Like, oh great, my deployment frequency's increased. So what, right?
So what?
That's
Yeah.
and it's the context of the person asking the question as well that matters so much. So yeah, like you said, somebody like the sales leader coming in or the CEO coming in and saying, yeah, so what, right? That's the question you have to ask. So yeah, it's great that seems like very ingrained into the principles, right? It seems like a big
It is
part of it.
definitely there. Yeah.
That's good. Well, yeah, well, good. This episode's on track so far. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of interesting like real world examples of say like an organization that say really I don't know unlocked value by going deeper than just measuring those sort of low level metrics around deployment or lead
Yeah,
time?
for sure. So, one of the things that we do each year is we have a DORA Awards opportunity. And this is where customers of both Google Cloud and DORA can come in and sort of self nominate. One that won an award this year, and actually the title of the award was going beyond the four keys, so going deeper than those four metrics. One of those companies was Moloko. And what they found was they were using those four keys and learning a lot from them, but they went beyond that by investing in a FinOps platform as well and really thinking about their FinOps capabilities so that they could really understand where were they spending and what opportunities did they have to improve. So they found hidden cost saving opportunities that saved millions in annual spend and fundamentally reshaped how they approached cloud cost management. But they did this while also speeding up they do a lot with machine learning. They sped up their machine learning training time by about 10x. They reduced their cost by 4x. And so this is really interesting, right? We talked about that throughput and stability aren't necessarily trade-offs. Here we find that cost and the speed to train a model aren't necessarily trade-offs, but in fact, you can improve them both together.
Well, yeah, that's pretty impressive. I mean, yeah, I think when you start bringing sort of conversations about cost into the mix, I guess that helps make the pitch that DORA could provide a kind of like common language for DevOps teams and business teams to sort of rally around. Does that hold true? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that it is a fair assessment, and frankly, even just getting uh, teams within the technology organization talking about a common set of metrics, right? If we all agree that we're going to measure software delivery performance using these four metrics, then when I talk about deployment frequency, we all kind of have that as a shared vocabulary. And I think again, going back to these socio-technical systems, having that shared vocabulary is really a way to unlock that collaboration, that drive towards improvement, that alignment around what are the goals and objectives that we're actually striving for.
Yeah, nice. Great. Well, I mean, I feel like the rest of the questions I'd lined up for you are almost all been answered themselves. I guess so. Where I was going to go next was, we are talking about operational intelligence, the idea of connecting telemetry to business outcomes in real time. I think the real time part is often the biggest struggle for a lot of organizations when they're trying to bring together those potentially, slow business reports with real time telemetry coming out of tools. Where do you see sort of DORA fitting into that like bigger movement of organizations trying to become sort of real time in general?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, this idea of real time, because while we do want those real time insights, the reality is that, if let's say today your change lead time, as one example, is, maybe it takes a month to get a change from the developer's workstation all the way through to production. You, you're not like real time data into that isn't going to change much. And now you might be improving that. So over time, it's going to improve. And we want to be able to watch that. But minute to minute, you're probably not going to see any real change in that. I think the same can be said about, top line sales, right? Minute to minute, excusing any sort of seasonality
Sure.
across the day or whatever, right? Like you're going to see some similar patterns, and you want to see these long-term improvements that are happening. So I think it's about balancing, expectations. I don't expect to see each week necessarily a dramatic improvement in any particular metric, but over the long term, we should see the right trend happening with these metrics. And so I think that having that access to sort of telemetry data, both from business systems and our technology systems, like that can be really, really helpful and can help make those correlations obvious for you.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, a good opportunity as well, just to do a little shout out for the company I work for in my day job. So Squared Up, we're
Yeah.
an operational intelligence tool. Um, we see organizations trying to move towards sort of a mesh style data architecture, sort of all the time, right? Ditching the big data warehouses, and they've already just bring the data you need when you need it into a nice clean dashboard, right? That's the Squared Up pitch. Um, and that ultimately all that streaming insights sort of breaks down silos. It democratizes data. It makes everybody feel sort of empowered to find answers to questions, as long as it's in the right context for them, right? The sort of the so what for each team. Do you think that changes the way sort of DORA research can be applied, like in the world where everything can be streamed or should be streamed? Does that change things?
Yeah, I think it does, and I think importantly, like the so what question. That's what we really want to answer. So what? And also, just as importantly, what are we going to do with this? Right? Seeing the data on a dashboard is great, but it should incite change in the teams, some change in the way that we're working, giving us the idea of how can we push back against the status quo, and how are we going to measure that? Right? If we just relate that back to software delivery performance, one of the best ways to improve your software delivery performance, as I mentioned earlier, is to get fast feedback on the changes, right? And the same is true basically for anything, right? If we want to improve a business outcome, we're essentially taking an experimental approach. We have a hypothesis. We believe that by changing X, we're going to see Y go up or go down, whatever that particular metric is. Well, now that we have that, and if we have a baseline of how we're doing today, or maybe historically over the last 3 months, now we can start making changes and actually observing what is the impact of those changes. And so that we get that fast feedback. And I think that that's what's really powerful and exciting, is the ability to get that fast feedback to support that hypothesis driven or experimental approach to making changes, so that we can, again, drive that culture of continuous learning. And I think the other thing that is important that goes along with that is sort of our approach to how we feel about experiments. Some experiments are going to prove our hypotheses, and some are going to disprove our hypotheses. Both of those experiments are successful experiments, right? It's not like one failed and one
Sure,
and,
yeah.
and one succeeded, right? As long as we take those lessons and carry them forward, it's great that we learned. Even if we learned we were wrong, that's a good thing to know.
Yeah, it surprised me in this series actually how often the topic of sort of continuous learning comes up in the
Uh-huh.
conversations I've had. It's not just been about sort of being able to react quickly, or to reduce mean time between failure or anything like that. It really is about generally improving, and the impact that has on team culture, team well-being, all of the knock-on effects of everybody, I guess, sort of feeling a bit sort of safer to be out of their comfort zone, to have access to be able to answer their own questions, that kind of thing. Yeah,
Absolutely.
nice to hear that's part of it. Yeah, I think, and for me as well. I mean, in my day job, I work with a lot of squared up customers, and quite often people struggle with just what they want to see on a dashboard. And I think if there was an equivalent to the DORA framework for sort of every area of business, I think that would actually be
Yeah.
awesome, right? The four key sales metrics that everybody needs, the four
Right.
key, that kind of thing. I think that having that structure to sort of rally around is pretty cool. Um,
Yeah, I think the other thing that's interesting about a data mesh and always streaming, like once we've built a dashboard, sometimes we get sort of overly connected to that dashboard, and like it becomes precious, and we have to have that one forever. If it's easy to create these and easy to pull together different data sources for new insights, I think it also makes it easier for us to jettison a dashboard. Like,
mhm.
all right, we have a question that we want to answer. Here's the data we need to answer this question. Let's go answer that question. Once we have and we see that we're good, we can maybe delete that dashboard, or move it to a place where we're not monitoring it daily. We're just looking at long-term trends to make sure we haven't gone off. But having the ability to quickly r- bring together and sort of visualize information like that, I think is really powerful.
Well, I mean, just sort of your own opinion, what sort of opportunity do you think there is there, if you can imagine a world where you can just easily slot together engineering, sales, customer satisfaction, all that stuff sort of all together for you personally, what would you hope to sort of get out of that?
Yeah, I think personally what I would hope to get out of it is something that we see happening like in the SRE space, right? We set service level indicators and service level objectives, and we try to understand what is it that the customer is trying to accomplish. Well, the reality is that customer needs and expectations change over time, right? And so we can't set up a set of SLIs and SLOs today and expect in 3 years' time that those are going to be the right SLIs and SLOs for us. We have to evolve those over time. And so I think it actually the ability to pull those together and to like reimagine what we're looking at allows us to be even more user centric, to really focus on what are the needs of the users or the customers of our business. And let's make sure that we're always adapting and delivering on those expectations.
Yeah. Yeah, nice. Some good advice there. I mean, maybe that's a good sort of next question is if there was, somebody listening to this had real sort of big aspirations to bring DORA into their organizations, apart from all of the great little nuggets that have been dusted throughout so far, is there some other like big piece of advice you would give to an organization trying to sort of bring DORA to life for them? Not just the quarterly report, but actually living, breathing.
Yeah, I think my big piece of advice there is not to start big. Don't try to bring it to the entire organization, but rather start with one or two applications or services that matter to your organization, and start experimenting with the framework itself. I'm all for small changes that lead to big outcomes and driving those iteratively. I often remind organizations that if you can't change the way one team works, you can't have any expectation that you're going to change how the entire organization works, right? And that change happens over time and with dedication and so forth. So I think starting smaller than what you hope for is a good way to go and prove out that this is going to work, and not only work here, right? We've seen it work. We've seen DORA and this approach and the framework work at many, many different organizations. But each organization has its own unique context and its own flavor of how it
Mm.
does everything, and specifically its own set of customers that it's trying to serve. So you want to sort of meld or mold DORA into your context, prove that that works, and then think about scaling it out wider.
Yeah, I think there's not to put these wonderful people down, but there's often, I think leadership are often a blocker in a lot of organizations. So many of our customer champions often start off as the practitioner, the individual contributor, the team member who just wants to make something better. And
Right.
convincing leadership's often the next step, right? And it's not usually that there's a problem there. It's just it's a necessary evil, I guess. But if you could sort of drive one mindset shift into all leadership teams overnight about sort of how they see DORA metrics. Do you have an idea of what that would be?
Yeah, we've actually investigated the role of leadership a number of times throughout the years within DORA, and we really point to this idea of transformational leadership being the place where everything kind of improves. And you might contrast transformational leadership with transactional leadership, right? Transactional leadership, I give you a task, I tell you to go do it, and that's how I'm leading. Whereas transformational, like the leader's role is really to sort of set alignment and set goals, but let the team have the autonomy on how do I actually accomplish those goals. There are a number of other considerations. There are components of transformational leadership, but I think that this is the big thing. As a transformational leader, like you're encouraging and enabling a culture of learning and experimentation, and that does require you sometimes as a leader to let go and just
Mm,
let the team discover the right way. The reality is that the team on the ground knows more about what should change today than you do as a leader because you're disconnected from that work.
sure. Yeah. And if those teams, obviously, just another plug, right, have squared up, they can have all those lovely roll up dashboards for their leadership team if they don't want to feel so disconnected.
There you go.
Shameless. Sorry, shameless.
Yes, of
But
course. Well, while we're doing shameless posts, or shameless, I'll throw in the Dora community as well. So at Dora.community, we've got thousands of practitioners and leaders and researchers coming together discussing all the time. How do we take these research insights and put them into action within our teams? And this idea of how do we manage up, right? How do we
mm,
help our leaders show up the right way? That comes up in a lot of our discussions, both our online discussions and on the email list.
great. Yeah, that's awesome. Just as a closing question, and I guess sort of forward looking, what do you see as being sort of the next big frontier for DORA research?
Yeah, no surprise to anyone, but AI is the next frontier. We started investigating sort of the impacts of AI in 2023. Very early days then, of course, and each year we're going deeper and deeper into AI because it truly is, it's taking up a lot of oxygen in the room, as we all know, and there are a lot of new ways of working. The space is moving so fast. I'm really excited about it from a research perspective because, like I said, we did start researching this in 2023. So we're able to watch some trends that are happening across the industry over time. And I think that, the answer is complex, right? Is AI good or bad? Like, yes, it is. And we're seeing and trying to really understand, how do you get the most out of AI? I kind of see some parallels, because Dora's been around for a long time. We saw the emergence of cloud and the adoption of cloud. And one of the things that we saw over time was that it's not that you're using the cloud that matters, but rather how you use the cloud. Are you actually taking advantage of what the cloud has to offer? And I think we're going to see a similar pattern with AI. It's not just that you like deployed a bunch of AI licenses to all of your developers, but how are they using them? Where throughout the development lifecycle is AI being leveraged? Those things are really going to matter.
Yeah, I think that is a very hot topic, especially in the sort of world where who gets to call themselves a developer changes quite radically with
Yes,
AI. So
absolutely.
yeah, we've had some interesting PRs in some of our repos thanks to a bit of vibe coding, but so what? Like it's working for people, and that's what PRs are
Working
there for.
working code wins. Working code wins,
Yeah,
and that
exactly.
that hasn't changed. Yeah,
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I really appreciate your time. Eh, I mean, for me, I have always just looked at it as like the four metrics on our DORA dashboard internally. So I will definitely go and check out the DORA community and learn a bit more
excellent.
myself. So
Yeah,
yeah,
please do.
well, yeah. Thanks for stopping in, Nathan. Maybe we'll have another chat about another interesting topic later in the series. But yeah, I really appreciate your time today.
That sounds great. Thanks so much for having me, Adam.
Thank you very much, and thanks to everyone for listening. And we'll catch you next time.